Hey everyone, Oli here, and this is my review of The Mutants, the fourth story of the ninth season of classic Doctor Who, starring John Pertwee as the third Doctor. The Mutants is the 63rd story overall, it's 6 episodes long, and is written by Bob Baker and Dave Martin. So the plot of The Mutants is as follows. When a strange pod turns up at Unit HQ, the Doctor and his assistant Joe suddenly find themselves involved in another dangerous mission for the Time Lords. The TARDIS takes them to Skybase 1, above the inhospitable Solos. It is the 30th century and the planet is about to gain independence from Earth's glorious empire. But someone on Solos has other plans, and alarmingly, the natives are slowly mutating into fierce looking creatures. It's time for the Doctor and Joe to find out why. The Mutants is actually considered to be one of the worst stories in the John Pertwee era, if not the worst, but I have to disagree. I actually think The Mutants is a really good story, and I would say that The Mutants is probably one of John Pertwee's more underrated stories, especially, and I think this is also the most underrated story of season 9. The production of the story was rather interesting. I liked the sets, especially Skybase Swan and the Solonian caves and the pathway to Sondergaard's domain, which also had trippy effects and a trippy blue screen, which I actually liked. And another aspect I liked was Kai's transformation into that angel thingy. That was also trippy as well. And I also liked the location filming that was the Solonian wastelands. The script was rather good to say the least, and I would actually think it's underrated because there's great bits of dialogue and great moments and stuff like that. The dialogue that was used is interesting as well, and I actually thought it was a good idea for the overlords to use derogatory terms to call the mutant smarts. Yeah, it sucked, but it does actually fit in with the theme of the story anyways. I like the design of the Solonian mutants. They looked rather menacing or rather scary, but it managed to work in that way. They aren't, but because they actually aren't villainous at all. They're just mutated Solonians and they couldn't mutate properly because I can't remember what exactly happened, but yeah, they couldn't mutate properly. Okay, and the story was directed by Christopher Barry, and as I mentioned before, Christopher Barry is very good at capturing all the dark and dreary stuff from Doctor Who, and The Mutants is no exception. The Mutants was done well in my opinion. This story is basically Doctor Who's reiteration of the segregation policy that was used in the South African apartheid, and that was also used in the first Doctor story, The Savages, which was also directed by Christopher Barry. It was done pretty well. They explained the apartheid aspects for in a sci-fi way really well, such as the different signs for the Earth Overlords and the Solonians, and having the Overlords call the Solonians Solonian mutant smarts. And I like the theme of racial or species prejudice, genocide, colonialism, imperialism, and evolution. It was all done very well, and it was in tandem with the plot of the story. And I actually think it's underappreciated as well, and there are very few stories in Doctor Who that can actually do this without going off to the deeper and focusing on one aspect and completely neglecting the other. So the mutants they actually do this really well, and I'll give my hat on and a tip off Bob Baker and Dave Martin for this. We also had some good moments in the story that I feel like they were underappreciated, such as Kai defending Joe against the mutants in the caves because it was quite scary as well, and it was also well done. And Kai's last minute evolution to save the day, that I actually do have a problem with, but it was still a good one because I didn't really like the Marshal that much. Acting of our leading duo. John Pertwee was great in this story. He had some very good moments, and I liked how the Doctor was able to keep his cool pretty much throughout the entire story, considering the fact we had the racist tyrant in the Marshal and his apologist Jaeger, and the Doctor doesn't have to do a whole lot of over the top action scenes. Apart from that bit when Varan was actually trying to attack the Doctor in episode 2, but his acting skills were used very well here, and I really like that. Katie Manning was great as Jo, as usual. She does get to do a lot of stuff, and yeah, I really like that Jo is really coming to her own in this story, and at this point in her time in Doctor Who. Even though it does kind of suck that she does get captured an awful lot, especially in episode 1 when Kai accidentally captured her, or when the overlords were trying to chase them, and at that one point she actually passed out on Solos because she couldn't handle the Solonian atmosphere. And I liked how she was able to free herself towards around the middle part when they were all captured, when she was able to free herself and got the Dr. Sonic to rescue Kai, Stubbsy, Stubbs, and Cotton. and to escape from the Marshal, even though they were captured again, and they were pretty much used as leverage for the doctors, for the Doctor to cooperate in the Marshal's plans when the other Earth superiors came to see what was going on. Despite all these, Joe does go throughout these mission stories without the presence of UNIT, and I actually do think it's a good idea because it does allow the Doctor and Joe to have some good moments for themselves and a good opportunity to grow as a Doctor companion duo. And speaking of UNIT, this is obviously the third story in a row not to feature them, and it's a good idea to have the Doctor away from UNIT and the Brigadier as it gives them a nice little break, and as I mentioned before, it allows the Doctor and Joe to have more moments for themselves and obviously have this room for character development. To the side cast, and I would say all of them are most of them are very good and rather well written. To start off, our first good character was Kai. He was the recipient of the message box that the Time Lord had sent the Doctor to Unit HQ. He was one of the Solonian leaders that wanted independence from the Overlords, and the Administrator was going to grant them access, but then he was eliminated and his hopes are pretty much dashed. At the end, he transforms into this advanced Solonian angel and pretty much vaporizes the Marshal to death. He was a good character, but the way he was used to defeat the Marshal, my apology, felt a bit cheap, and it was pretty much an easy direct Machina victory. Cotton, he was one of the Marshal's aides, and he helped the Doctor to try and stop the Marshal after seeing what was wrong. After the Marshal's death, he was appointed as the acting Marshal to see Earth's withdrawal from Solos. Cotton to me actually stood out to the rest of the other side characters, and I'd say he's my favourite side character from season 9. I like the fact that they opted to go for Rick James, a black actor, to play the role, even though it was a bit weird having a black actor playing a character named Cotton. Even though there are other actors actually considered to play Cotton, I think he was the one that actually got the part. But I liked how he was written, and I actually liked how he actually made it to the end without dying and I actually liked how he was able to play a major part in the story and not actually die, considering he had other black characters die after playing like a significant role in the story, such as Faray in The Enemy of the World back in season 5. She had an important part to play, but she ends up dying in episode 4. So for Stubbsy, so for Cotton to actually make it to the end of the story was actually quite good for me, to say the least. And we also had Stubbs. He was another aide of the Marshal, and he was a friend of Cotton. He also wanted Solos to gain independence from Earth, and unfortunately he dies in episode 4 when the Marshal shoots him in the back. Stubbs had a family on Earth, and that made his death hit a bit hard. He is played by Christopher Cole, who played Phipps in my favorite classic Who story, The Seeds of Death, and that's another reason why he stands out, because I recognize the actor, and considering the fact that Phipps died in episode 4 as well says a lot. You also had Professor Sondergaard. He was a scientist that was expunged by the Marshal, and he wanted to study the Solonians, and he wanted to cure the scary mutations. And the Doctor and Kai finding him was pretty much a turning point for the story, because Kai was obviously the recipient of the message box, and when that opened, the Doctor was able to show Sondergaard, and then they realized that, and the walls inside the message box was just like tablets of some drawings, and the Doctor realized that's the Solonian life cycle, and in the end, they pretty much mutate into this angel creature as Kai did. And so when the Marshal was defeated, he stayed on Solos to help Kai with the other Solonians, for the other Solonians to try and mutate as well. He was a good character and he came at the right point of the story. We also had Varan. He was another Solonian leader who worked with the Overlords. He decides to team up with the Doctor when his son Vaughn dies at the hands of the Marshal. He dies when he gets sucked out into space around episode 4 or something. Yeah, and when there's like a big hole in the wall and then Varan just is sucked out. He was another good character, but I wish he lasted a bit longer. On to our villains. First off, we had the Marshal of Solos. He was obviously like the Marshal of the Skybase, and he was highly opposed to Solos getting their independence because that would pretty much mark the end of his career. And had Varan's son kill the Administrator. The Marshal obviously dies at the hands of the mutated Kai at the end of the story. And the Marshal was a great villain. He was very ruthless and very evil, and because he pretty much wanted to kill every single Solonian, and I think that pretty much makes him one of the more dangerous enemies is for the Third Doctor ever. And Now that's actually what makes him great, and he's played by Doctor Who guest star veteran Paul Watson Jones, and he did the Marshal a great deal of justice for portraying the Marshal did a great deal of justice. And we also had Jaeger. He was another scientist, and he wanted to make Solus habitable for the humans. The Doctor was very much against the experiments that Jaeger was doing, and obviously Jaeger didn't see anything wrong, and he just pretty much brushed off the Doctor's complaints. And Jaeger wasn't as villainous as the Marshal, but he felt as if he was doing the right thing, even though that would have pretty much killed every single Solonian on Solos, and that was a good addition to the plot because he was just doing his job. He didn't really see anything wrong with it, and that was pretty cool as well. And Jaeger was also very well written. So on to the problems I do have with the mutants. There was obviously a bit of a pacing issue around the middle when it's pretty obvious with the part when the Doctor, Joe, Star, Sundergaard, Stubbs, and Cotton were trapped in the caves when the Marshal was sent them to destroy the caves. It could have been a four-parter, and the plot would have still, and the plot working with the themes of the story would have still worked. And I also felt that the Marshal's Hukai transforming to kill the Marshal at the end was a bit cheap and too easy a victory, considering the fact that it was at the last minute, and you would actually say it's kind of rushed. So to conclude this review, The Mutants is a really good story and has a great plot if one can look beside the pacing issues, and this is one of the best pseudo political stories in Doctor Who at this point, and I would give The Mutants an 8 out of 10. My next review will be the season 9 finale, The Time Monster, which obviously features the return of the Master and the second appearance of Atlantis, so look out for that. Thank you for watching this review. Please let me know your thoughts of this story and this review, and please subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. Until then, see you later.